Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Village of Bartlett Committee of the Whole meeting for November 3rd, 2015. I call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Aarons? Here. Kammerer?
Here.
Carbonaro?
Here.
Daney?
Here.
Hopkins?
Here.
Ranky?
Here.
President Wallace?
Here. First item on our agenda this evening for the Committee of the Whole meeting is under the Planning and Zoning Committee for Chairman Ranky.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have only one item, the Blue Heron Business Park Amended Annexation Agreement, which is case 15-20, for discussion and forwarding to the Plan Commission. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, Trustee Ranky. We have with us Dean Kelly, who's representing Blue Heron Business Park, and with Abbott Land and Investment. Just for orientation, Blue Heron Business Park is on the northeast corner of Route 25 and West Bartlett Road. Right now, it's undergone quite a bit of land reclamation, but there has been one building that is almost completed construction, traffic service, TSP, and then we've got another building that is hopefully going up soon. Dean is requesting the third amendment to the annexation agreement, which is to reduce the buffer zone to a uniform 50 feet. It will also require a revised overall PUD concept plan with a 50-foot buffer zone, a revised PUD pre-approved site plan with a 50-foot buffer zone, and the special use for the revised PUD. And let me just, it's probably easier to see on your packets, but this map here is the original PUD plan. And if you look on the east portion of the property, there's a wide green strip. Years ago, when the village was fighting the bale fill, and then the dissemination of all the properties that were once owned by the group Swank were divided and sold off to different private developers, and Dean's company being one of them, and Heron's Landing subdivision on the east side was another. The middle portion was sold to the state for a state habitat area. And at the time, there was a heron rookery in this area just directly east of this little bubble. And so our consultant at the time recommended that when this property that's called the Blue Heron Business Park be developed, that the buffer be wider in the middle section to protect the heron rookeries. And it also was a berm and a tree landscaped area. Well, over the years, the herons have developed pretty well in there. And now we actually have an eagle nest down in this corner. But Dean's request, and he's had in your packet, there's an ecological analysis by Hay and Associates. They believe that the old buffer zone and the width and the berming and the landscaping really doesn't have much of an impact on whether the herons are there or not, because the rookeries move further east according to them. And then as a result, Dean has asked for this buffer zone to remain 50 feet uniform throughout the whole width of that and be planted in native grass species. And that's the gist of his annexation petition. And because these are part of the PUD plan, this plan would be revised to look like this with a uniform buffer zone. And then the other thing that we have in here, which is part of the PUD plan, is that there's what we call a pre-approved site plan on this property. And if the developer matches parameters of this pre-approved site plan for a typical lot, he can go right to a building permit. And that was part of the original annexation agreement. And then the new pre-approved site plan, if it's approved, would have, again, the 50-foot buffer, the typical lot layout, and then this is the buffer zone, buffer detail with the native species listed on there. So that's the sum and substance of his request. And Dean is here to answer any questions, and F can try to answer any questions.
So the only area that's really reducing too much is that 150-foot area to 50. So everything's uniform 50. It's not like we're building on it, it's just a grassy area, so it's still a buffer zone, really.
Right. This is probably the bigger one to see. This bubble you're exactly right, was 150, and it would go down to 50 throughout the rest of the area. No building on it. It would stay a native grass species, no mow area, and be a 50-foot buffer.
That area in the prior annexation agreement was called for a berm.
I see.
And it called for landscaping in terms of trees and things.
See it here.
But the other property is lower, so I'll let Dean address why he thinks that's not necessary.
Thanks. It is on. Good. It's exactly that, Brian. And I think after 10 years, and there was a reason that we came up with this, and Jim mentioned it because of the rookery, and things have changed out there. The birds have moved, and they're plentiful, and now, of course, we have an eagle on the south end, and we'll comply with that. There's some certain restrictions that we have to follow, but it just didn't make sense to have a very small berm. It was kind of like, what are we berming? We're blocking 300 acres of trees behind us, so it just didn't make sense. Didn't make sense with the grades, and so that's why we're proposing just the 50-foot uniform buffer. Any storage yards, the fences will be 50 feet, or actually 51 feet from the property line, so that green space will all be on the perimeter, and we'll set up an association to maintain that.
So currently, there's no setback for the rear of the site plan?
The site plan setback really is just that 50-foot buffer. These typically on this portion of this development, they're marketing it to people who have outdoor storage, so that it's attractive to businesses with outdoor storage. Let me just go back to the original PUD plan. It's divided into various segments. The only ones along this, and I don't know this color, I'm going to say it's gray, that's kind of the area where they have the pre-approved site plan with the outdoor storage. This is more kind of, could be commercial or industrial, commercial, industrial on the south end. They would have to come to you for site plans because they won't match this pre-approved. And this property up here could be more of a heavier industry. And Welsh Brothers at one time expressed some interest in it. And Welsh Brothers is up in the north, if you know where we've met with them before. So it's got different uses. The only one that the berm's affecting are the easterly ones.
So theoretically, someone could come before this board and request to put a building up to that 50-foot buffer, correct?
Well, in this area, if they meet this typical lot layout, they don't come to the board. They go right to a building permit, staff review, and then right to a building permit. That's the way the annexation agreement is set up right now. It's the other lots that would need site plan approval.
I think the question is there a rear yard with that pre-approved site plan?
It's just this 50-foot berm.
So the answer is yes, they could build a building right up to that 50-foot berm.
Oh, they have to build a building in this envelope.
No, but they could come before this board and request a special use to build up to that buffer zone.
If they don't meet this pre-approved site plan, then they have to come to you for a site plan review. And then the setbacks would be what we would have in our industrial district. So there is a rear yard setback, but it is for the building.
And Jim, when the rear yard setback, it's probably less than 50 feet.
I'm going to say it is, yeah.
So that's probably, and if we had a building, if somebody needed a building that large where they were actually going to, I mean, I'd love to see a building like that. We'd probably steer them towards the frontage lots on Route 25. I think the vision here is, these outside storage lots, they're buffered by the 300-acre park. we've set it up where the buildings are in front, and that screens the storage in the back, and then along on the east side of or the west side of the main road between Route 25, that's where we envision, the Brewster Creek type buildings that you see with the precast, and actually one of the buildings we're working on now that'll be on that side, on the outside storage side, is a proposed 60,000 square foot precast building. So we're actually getting more building than we thought back there, which is good for us and good for the village.
What might be somewhat deceptive is how big are the actual lots? Are we talking 5 acres,
Yeah.
10 acres?
The
So
one
you're
that
not
you
gonna
have
put
now is 5, isn't it?
Yeah, the current one, the traffic services one that is being completed, I think is about 7 or 8 acres. There's another one that you'll probably see at some point. We're working through the process with staff, and that's about a 9-acre parcel.
So it'd be an enormous building to put on that kind.
Right.
You just wouldn't do it, right?
I can't envision a building that size, and it's a long and narrow piece. So we're kind of we're going to divide the property going east and west. So we'll create those lots along the way.
So if you want to reduce the buffer zone, what's the purpose for this?
The purpose first. It just doesn't make sense, especially the hump. That really impedes our ability to develop that lot because you can't sell it and you can't use it. So this will help us, get more utilization. And it was one of those when we're cleaning up the annexation agreement, we looked at it as totally unnecessary. We're still providing a 50-foot buffer, which is more than would normally be required in industrial. And what are we really screening back there? There's a 300-acre forest.
Anything else? Okay, so we'll pass this on to the Plan Commission. Great.
Requires a Plan Commission public hearing on those PUD revisions.
With the old-style signs.
Yeah.
I like your thinking on that.
We'll comply with whatever they tell us to. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dean.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. President, that's all we have for planning and zoning.
Thank you, Chairman Ranke. Next item we have on our agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting is under the Public Works Committee. Chairman Kammerer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight we have the item overhead sewer program that was briefly brought up earlier this evening. And I guess, would that be turned over to Dan? Dan, if you could give us a little more information on that, would be helpful.
Sure. Thank you, Trustee Kammerer. As you said, this is in regards to our overhead sewer program and the possibility of amending the program to include rental properties, as was brought up at the town hall meeting. Just a little bit of background on the overhead sewer program. My understanding, it was developed back in the early 90s to help those properties, those older properties that have gravity sewers in their basement, basically floor drains that drain by gravity to our sanitary sewer system. During a large rain event, our system gets inundated with stormwater and surcharges, which causes backups into those gravity drains in the basement. This program basically breaks that connection, puts in an ejector pit, which then all the sewer within the house drains to that ejector pit, and then it is pumped up and out to our sewer, which prohibits the backup. At the time, we were doing a 50-50 program. There wasn't a lot of interest at that time. We got to around the 2000 time frame. We adjusted it and made the change to 100% funded by the village for the overhead sewer portion. Now, if they had tile footings, sump pumps, that type of stuff that were illegal connections to our sanitary sewer system, the residents required to make that separation with the project on their own cost, but they get the overhead sewer paid for by the village. I included some history on how many we've done over the last few years. You can see there hasn't been a lot of activity. The good news is we haven't had a lot of backups. They typically, I think it was in 10-11, where we had 7, which was our biggest. I'm willing to bet we had a large storm event during that time period, and we had sewer backups, and the program usually gets active during that time period. And we've had a little bit of activity over the last couple of years because we have had some pretty significant storms. I talked to previous employees and our current staff to find out the history of the rental properties and multifamily being paid for or not. The issue with the multifamily is when you have, say, a 4-unit townhouse, the way we were serving that property was with one sewer. So you had one sewer serving 4 properties. If there was an issue with the sewer backup, all 4 units would have to be involved, and then someone would have to get that ejector pump. And it just got complicated as far as how you would coordinate that, who's going to get the ejector pump. They're going to be responsible to make sure that it's running and all that, so we left it out. As far as the residential property, rental properties, the thought back then was these people are making money renting their property. They're considered commercial, therefore they were not part of the program. So that's kind of the background.
Let me ask a couple of questions. First, is there anything wrong with our sewer system?
No, but we do have miles of sanitary sewer that is aged. It's got cracks. Not only does our system have cracks, but the services that service all the properties have cracks. So when we get rain, we see the treatment plant gets a lot more flow. So during these large events, we can't have sewer backups.
In terms
Mainly
of,
in the older area.
I'm sorry?
But mainly in the older area that
Right.
doesn't have the overhead sewers.
Right. In terms of numbers, I mean, how many households are out there, regardless of type? I mean, or you can break it down by type, that would potentially use this, that are eligible, that are not eligible? I mean, how does this policy change in terms of numbers?
It's pretty much the north side of town.
Okay.
As far as having an exact number of how many rental property, I don't have those numbers.
Okay.
We could try to find that. I don't know how we would determine that, but I think in the case of the town hall meeting, that one it's a circumstance where the person is going to be living there. They're not planning to rent it long term. At least that's what was discussed, but I don't have a good number as far as how many rental units there are or how many existing gravity basements we have right now.
I just wanted to make sure it's nothing that the village has done wrong.
No, these are homes that back it's prior to the 80s, right? Since the 80s, we've been doing overhead sewers. Prior to that, it wasn't a requirement, and it was totally legal and permitted.
Okay.
I think it would be interesting to learn how many more people could apply for this program if these changes were implemented, to see what it would or potentially could cost the village. So,
Do we have the ability to do that, or is it going to be just guesstimate? How would you go about doing that, Dan?
I'm not sure.
Door to door?
I'm not sure how it would be determined if
It would
they're a
have to be
rental
door
or
to
not.
door. Do you own?
I don't know
I think,
how we would find
I
that
think through the assessor's office, you pay a different property tax when you're owner occupied versus a landlord. You don't get that exemption. You get a homeowner's exemption when you're a homeowner and you live in your property. When you're a landlord, you don't get that exemption. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I think we could probably contact the assessor's office and gain some more information maybe.
Well, and I guess to me, I mean, I'm interested in an order of magnitude. I mean, are we talking about 10 homes, 100 homes, 1,000 homes? I mean, you see where I'm going? I mean, I know that maybe we can't do it with mathematical precision. That sounds like a great idea. But, you know, kind of a ballpark, what are we talking about here?
Well,
And are you interested in the number that would be coming through at any rate, or just the ones that would come through if you opened it up to landlords?
Well,
I wasn't clear which.
Yes. The answer is yes, because obviously we're always trying to help the residents, and we'd like to try to make this right. But at the same time, we want to understand the potential for liability there. And frankly, a lot of communities that I've represented, we've always done a 50-50 system. And to me, when we do a 50-50 split and there's no interest, that means there's no problem.
Is that what-
Kind of echoes Dan's sentiment that when there's a storm and things start flooding, well, then there's a problem, and people will come on in and they'll do the 50-50. So 100% is pretty generous.
Right.
And, we're always trying to,
Ranky, does 50-50 include do you know if it includes the rental, like the landlords too?
I think it's been both.
Okay.
I think it's been both.
Because I know in my personal experience, I don't get that paid for, because I've had sewer problems with the rental, and
Yeah.
I get nothing.
It is. It's
Um,
hard.
I'm of the opinion that if you're renting properties, that's part of the expense of doing the business. I think it should be treated as a commercial property. I think that's just part of the nature of owning rental properties. So I think it's, from simplicity standpoint, it's just easier to, that's my opinion, it's easier to have it for homeowners. Homeowners are improving their own property.
We've had this on the books for a number of years since I've been here, and believe me, if someone gets flooded out and they lose catastrophically their whole basement of items, they will come and seek either Dan or I, what can be done, and this program is out there, and it's funded 100%. So we've taken care of a lot of the problems. There are probably a few, but some people still go in and screw the pipe down into the floor drain, and on heavy rain events, they just, don't want the village in their house. So
You would say
Wise.
no whole lot.
I would say not a whole lot are left.
Thanks, that
Very wise.
One thing to keep in mind also is, if we're debating whether it's commercial or it's residential and whatnot, even a renter is part of the makeup of this village.
Yeah.
And, we have a homeowner, and if this program were available, think regardless, whether it's a homeowner or a renter, if their personal belongings are in that basement and they're destroyed, that's impact on one of our residents that live in this community, whether they rent or own. And I think that, we need to take a look to see if we can't give relief. It just, we don't need, I don't like categorizing when we talk about, commercial, because they own the property and rent. They're residents. And I'd like to see them all treated equally, and I think it's an unfair, obsolete.
But they have other avenues of redress with their landlord in those cases.
Well, that's what I'm
If the
saying.
property is destroyed, they can, because of landlord neglect or not getting something fixed, they have recourse with that. If, like I've said to others, if the roof started to leak, would the village be willing to come over and fix the roof?
Yeah, but see, this
No.
has,
Dealing with sanitary sewers, and
Right.
that's a whole different.
and this is a deterioration of the product that was put in by the village.
The landlord, it's cost of doing business.
The village.
Wait, whoa. This problem is not created because our sewers are in bad shape. Mr. Din just said, yes, they're aging, but the condition is not created. I mean, this is a system issue, and it occurs in older communities, not just in the village of Bartlett. So it's nothing that we have done wrong. With regards to rentals, I agree with President Wallace here on this one. It is a cost of doing business. You could probably take a tax deduction on it even.
Boy, I'm going to go for 3 tonight, aren't I? Yeah, I guess we have nights.
I'm not keeping score.
I would
Know the feeling.
assume that there's some type of, with this gentleman's situation where he's owned the property, maybe he still does claim the homeowner's exemption. Maybe there's some leeway there where he can sneak it under the carpet,
Been known to happen.
Yeah. I think maybe that might be a solution, because like Brian said, there's not that many of them out there. I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill here.
Well, Andy says that come June, his daughter is either going to live there or they're going to have a renter. So
Renter will buy
the
it.
problem is going to resolve itself.
Regardless of
The
what he
renter
said,
won't buy it until it's fixed.
regardless of what he said this evening, my concern would be for the residents of this community. And we have a program in place, and the residents currently are being penalized because they're renters. And maybe they can't afford, to buy their house, and obviously that's why they're renting. But I believe in my heart they're being penalized for that.
How?
Because they have a problem with the storage system.
It's not the renters that have the problem, it's the landlord. that
But
has
they're
the
living
problem.
there.
It's
They're the
not
person that
it's none of the
actually
renters.
sleep and eat in that home.
The landlord has to provide a dwelling that meets code.
Can I make a suggestion here?
See?
Can we get it, can we just do this on another committee meeting and just, or at least send a memo out and just give us just a ballpark as to what we're talking about here? We're talking about 10 more houses in the village potentially affected. If we're talking about 150 houses and times of $5,000 a crack,
We certainly,
yeah, let's just do that. Is that all right? We can find out how many.
That'd be perfect.
Want to open it up to the
Was the
commercial?
$50,000, was that for,
It's a really big house.
was this for future in this ordinance? $50,000, is that
we
what?
budget $50,000 every year. We never take advantage of all.
That's what's in the current budget.
Right.
You want to open it up to the commercial?
No, I just want to get some more information about how many.
We're gonna get more.
Just how many rentals. Just to be clear, staff, just how many rentals we have that are on the north side. Just single-family rental homes.
Or just the north?
Right.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, then that is all we have under.
Can we make-
Public work. You have a question?
Well, I'd like to know how many rentals there are in the whole village, not just the north side
One-
of Bartlett.
Well,
I think it's,
Oh, my God.
Rentals in the whole village?
yeah, not just the north. Mayor Wallace said just the north side of Bartlett, and I think we,
I think that under the overhead sewer issue is only on the north end, because the
Yeah.
south end is, as Brian said, those homes all required to have the overhead sewers built when they were built.
so the rest of town, this is not a problem?
Right.
they're not eligible at all.
No,
They have them in.
right.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay. If
With that,
there's
I will
no
entertain
other
a motion.
questions, we're done with.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Aaron, seconded by trustee Daney. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Aaron's,
Yes.
Camera,
Yes?
Carbonaro,
Yes.
Daney, Hopkins,
Yes.
Ranky.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Yeah. What time do we have?
9 o'clock.
It's pretty close to my bedtime.
I don't know if I'm going to or not. It's late for me, man. How you doing, lady?
Yeah.
I'm going to strangle some of these.
Did I tell you red? Text message. Get your technology straight.
That's why I wore